All right, good morning, everybody. We are ready to get started. My name is Jennifer Morse. I'm with Madcap Software. I want to thank all of you for joining today. We are so happy to have you. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. We have a lot to cover. Okay, throwing it out there for everybody. Are you a content developer who's been tasked with creating an e-learning program? Or are you thinking of expanding your skill set into the learning and development space? Well, you have come to the right session. Learning and development is often an integral part of many organizations. It's designed to train and keep talent, empower end users of a product or service, and more, all with the goal of increasing productivity and empowering individuals to be successful. So e-learning is just one style within this learning and development space that's become so important and really critical today for organizations, given everything that's been going on in the world. So this task of creating an effective learning program might feel a little bit daunting. However, you most likely have that foundation to create an engaging program, leveraging much of the content development skills and existing technical documentation that you're in every day. And today, I am so honored to welcome Andrea Maliska, founder of Rebel Learn, a company that is passionate about helping other organizations build, maintain, and update learning and development programs. And it's such a treat to have her with us today to talk about these learning and development methodologies and how we can apply concepts of technical writing to build an effective and engaging learning program for a variety of learners. So welcome again, Andrea. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so thrilled. Before we jump in, because I know you have so much to cover, I just want to review two quick items of business for everybody before we jump in. As always, this webinar will be recorded and we're going to be emailing it out to everybody who's registered today. So not to worry if you have to pop out a little bit early, if you can't stay to the end. Also, in the go-to console that you can see there, there is a question panel. We would love it if you could post questions there. As we go on today, we're going to be getting to as many as we can at the end. Whatever we don't get to, we'll do our best to follow up with everybody after the fact. But we're going to give Andrea the floor here for the time that she has to present. So again, thanks so much for joining, Andrea. I know you have a lot to cover, so I'm going to go ahead and put myself on mute for a little bit here, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. It's so exciting to be here. And I am excited to be talking about this topic because I think it's one that a lot of companies are probably coming up against this year, knowing that they have probably the base started, but not knowing exactly how to get there. So that is what we are going to be talking about today. And I hope you take some fun tidbits away from today's presentation. So first, a little bit about me. I have been working in the learning and development space for 15 years, where I've built out learning and development and e-learning programs for corporations. And currently, I own my own business where I am brought on to architect learning strategy, build learning and development programs, help companies pick the right tools to execute these programs, and then implement and launch their products. I typically specialize in SaaS companies, startups, cybersecurity, and then companies that work in the Salesforce ecosystem. And I do have a couple companies that are outside of that, but I find that a lot of startups and SaaS companies are really looking for a lot of this right now. So today we are talking about how we can take the technical documentation that you already have created and how to turn it into a basic e-learning program. So as we go through the program today, I'm going to be touching on a lot of basics, and just know that I'm scratching the surface on a lot of the methodologies and the processes and procedures and whatnot in the learning and development space that you can do to implement these programs. But know that there's a lot more that you can do, and that you can dive into deeper. So this is just going to be scratching the surface. But in this world today of globally dispersed learning and the changing work from home landscape, being able to provide employees and customers alike with educational content that they can access on their own time from anywhere is becoming more and more vital. With most of the companies, while most companies may have technical documentation around their products or knowledge bases that help with the questions that come up on certain policies, processes, and features, a lot of them are lacking a solid learning program, and they're finding that is becoming an issue, especially given the current state of the pandemic and a lot of individuals going home and potentially not ever coming back into the office full time. So a lot of companies are finding that they need to find a way to educate and support their employee population and customers through e-learning programs. So first, we're going to kind of talk through what is the real difference between a knowledge base or technical documentation and a learning program, because they're both extremely important to the learning landscape, and they both definitely play their own role. And so a lot of companies are missing kind of one of those roles if they don't have both of these pieces. So I see learning programs as being a proactive way to educate your audience on the ways in which you want to understand your products, the ways in which you want them to interact with each other in the employee population, or as customers, clients, partners, and the way in which you want them to understand your culture. So as an example, a good onboarding program will take the audience on an experience that sets the stage for the remainder of their time as an employee or a client. It really sets a tone for their time in the company. A good onboarding experience will leave a good taste in the mouth, and you guessed it, a bad one will leave a bad taste in the mouth. Good training will minimize the amount of times that the learner needs to call support, access the knowledge base, or pull out their manual. So as the audience gets more comfortable in their roles with the products, policies, procedures, they will start to interact with technical documentation or a knowledge base when they need more information, when they find that learning gap that they might have within the company, when they want to dig deeper into a specific procedure or policy or product or feature, or when they run into that learning attrition that often happens after training. So it's typically more reactive in that they're going to the source when they need it. So what does this all mean for us as instructional designers and technical documentation writers? Well, it means that actually we're already halfway there, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why I see us being halfway there with our technical documentation. It means that while these two different types of learning may seem totally different, I really see technical documentation as being a great base for building out a learning program. So if you have a knowledge base that already exists, that learners come to answer questions, that customers access to refresh themselves on step-by-step processes, or employees come to in order to better understand a process or a policy, you have a majority of the info already written for a learning program. It's now just understanding and learning how we reuse, refresh, and translate these concepts into a learning program. So how do we take what we've already built and create a basic learning program from that? So before we jump into actually dissecting a document and putting it into learning, I wanted to go through and quickly talk about elements of a learning program. And this is one of many approaches that you can take, and this is one that a lot of instructional designers will use when they look at building out a program. So on the bottom there as our base, we have the tell me, which is, so this is the tell me, show me, let me, and you can research more of this. There's a lot of information about this. But as we have that base, it's the tell me, it's the concepts. This is where a majority of your technical documentation is. These are explaining and laying out those concepts. The new pieces of information that you want the individual to know. It's the ideas, the how-tos, the release notes, the new features, the system requirements. Concepts are the backbone of a learning program and where we normally start out as instructional designers. Next, you have the show me, and these are the visuals. So in this step, we're showing them what the concepts look like in action. So this could be a step or series of steps in a software application, a soft skill in action, a new feature being demonstrated, a visual of a process and its impact, a real-world example of a policy being followed or not being followed. So this is where the learner gets to see how the concepts that we kind of showed them in that tell me area are relating back into the real world and how it could potentially affect them in their day-to-day. And then lastly, we have the let me, and that's the application. So this is, in this step, we're going to be giving the learner the ability to apply the concepts that they just saw in action themselves. This can be a scenario, an interactive scenario, a quiz, potentially a lab environment where they can go and have hands-on application and work in an environment that has a virtual environment that they can actually get hands-on with a piece of software, a role play with a coworker or classmate, an on-the-job activity. So the list is pretty endless depending on what you want them to do. So application can be anywhere that they can apply those concepts. This is really where the learner cements the concepts when they're able to apply them to their day-to-day and see how they're going to be done day-to-day, or how they're going to be affecting their own position or role. This is where that learning actually really cements and takes place. So I see the technical documentation as being that tell me level. So you have a very large portion of a learning program already started by just having this technical documentation. So I'm not going to go too deep into this, but I do want to bring in a little bit of a methodology that I use and a lot of instructional designers are going to use. And again, there's a lot of different methodologies out there. This is one that I do use quite a bit, but I wanted to just kind of briefly touch on ADDIE. And you may already use it. You may use it in your technical documentation writing, or if you build out learning programs. But I do modify my ADDIE with a bit of iteration. So ADDIE typically leaves evaluation until the end, and I like to bring in evaluation after a couple different areas. And we'll kind of talk through each one of these different pieces when we get deeper into the webinar. But ADDIE stands for Analysis, Design, Development, Implementation, and Evaluation. And in general, this is what I use as a methodology to approach creation. I bring in those iterative areas along the way in order to make sure that what is going out the door during that implementation phase is as close to possible to my target audience's needs as I can get it. So what I want to minimize is the amount of change and updates that I do once I've implemented. I like to do that along the way so that at the end we can go live quicker to our audience after a pilot, because I always go through a pilot period with my programs when I put them out. So we'll kind of go through and we're going to apply ADDIE to some technical documentation today. But we're going to start out with a scenario. So this scenario, I find, another thing just to kind of keep in mind as you start to think about your learning programs is to build in some stories. So storytelling and building in storytelling into learning really helps to build a lot of context without having to do too much work. So let's go through a scenario that we're going to apply the ADDIE model to and get ready to build out a learning program. So the head of HR comes to us and asks us to translate certain concepts and sections of the employee handbook that they find employees are having a hard time following, or they see more issues coming up during an employee life cycle. So on top of receiving an employee handbook technical document, they also want to be able to provide some e-learning around the major concepts that they want employees to get from the handbook. We have the technical documentation already in Flare, and so she would like us to turn these pieces into basic learning program that they can add into the current LMS so that they can track who has received and gone through them. They want to, at a high level, test their knowledge. The LMS has a mobile app that a majority of the learners like to be able to access to take training since they are remote. So let's take this scenario and apply the iterative ADDIE model in order to get this learning program developed. And remember, we already have the tell me portion, the concepts of the training. Now we just need to go in and start to do some analysis and figure out where else we need to add in the show me and the let me if it makes sense. So we start out with the analysis phase, and this is probably going to be very similar to any analysis that you do on with your technical writing or with any documentation that you're creating. But we see that we have a document that has lots of really great content. But now what we need to do is we need to start to analyze a couple different things. So we need to first analyze our audience. So who is our audience and how do they learn? We know from the head of HR that they are remote and they like to be able to access their content on their tablets or mobile devices. We go back to HR and we ask if there's anything else we need to know about their needs and their preferences. So we want to dig a little bit deeper. They come back with that the audience is less formal in delivery and they respond well with content that they can interact with. Also, they tend to like to take training in smaller spurts. They don't like to sit down for 45 minutes and watch a bunch of videos. They like to be able to say, hey, I have 5 minutes here and 10 minutes there. And they want to be able to go back and easily find targeted concepts for refreshers. We then need to take a look and find out what's missing. So we need to do our gap analysis. Is there anything missing from this document that we need to make sure that we add in? So most of the concepts we need to create are already in that document. We have our base, like I've talked about. The pieces that we're missing really are those visuals and the application pieces. So we need to make sure to keep those in. And then we just want to make sure that the content is up to date. So we just check with HR, make sure that we have the most up-to-date version of the handbook. Will there be any changes coming up soon within the next couple months? Because what we don't want to do is put out some amazing content that we just built and then realize that we have to redo it as soon as we put it out. So figuring out kind of forward-looking future, and also, do we have everything in there? So we've determined from analysis that we have an audience that wants small, digestible content. So I'm looking at building out micro content that can be accessible on a phone or on a tablet. We'll add in some visual examples where applicable, and we'll add in some knowledge checks and some check on learnings to check their understanding, and probably an activity to make sure that we're reinforcing the concepts along the way. We also know that the policy isn't going to be changing within the next year, so we're good on that. So I'm going to send that small synopsis to my stakeholder before I get started. So I'm going to go ahead and do a quick evaluation on how I have taken the analysis and come out with it. I want to make sure that I'm on the right track and that I have gotten all the information correct before I go in and start designing the content. So I wanted to just give you a quick, before jumping into design, a quick look at the two different parts of the handbook that we're going to be designing. So we have a course that is use of computers. So that's going to be kind of one of the pieces that HR really wanted to make sure we built another additional learning around, and that we measured that learning. So use of computers is something that's really important to the company in the way that the email and the software code of ethics is utilized within the company. So these are the two pieces that we are going to take. So this is our Flare output. We had it in Flare and it's accessible this way. But now we're going to take these and we have two different lessons. So we have our overarching course, and we'll go through the design and the architecture of all this in the coming slides. And then we have two lessons, which are going to be the email of the internet and software code of ethics. So now with design, I want to make sure that in order to adequately design the content before we actually get into designing the content, that we understand the architecture of the LMS. So this is another big thing that you want to make sure that you understand. Even if you're not the one building into the LMS, you need to understand kind of what the architecture and the hierarchy is in the LMS that they're using. And I'm going to go through here. This is pretty typical. Different LMSs will have different names for it, but most of them do have a very similar hierarchy. And so I wanted to kind of put that out there. Is a lot of times at the very top level, you'll have the program or the learning path, or they also can call them bundles. So this is going to be where you have several different courses that make up a program, learning path, or bundle that you can kind of put together. Underneath that, you're going to have the course, module, or sometimes also called session, depending on the LMS, but that's where you're going to have that course. And a course is going to be made up of a bunch of different lessons. So you'll see that typically a learning management system or learning platform will allow you to typically go 3 levels deep when you build these out. You'll also always have the opportunity to build out just a course with lessons in it that isn't part of a program. So if you have something like employee handbook and that is going to be your course, then you can definitely have that standalone. So now that we kind of have an idea on our LMS, let's start to take a look at designing. So again, for the sake of this webinar, we're just going to concentrate on one course. So we're not going to look at a full learning path. We're going to concentrate on one course. that's part of a larger program, which is that employee handbook. And we're going to take a look at how to architect kind of these pieces. So first we want to give the course a name. I normally like to give these courses names that are action oriented and easy for the learner to know exactly what to expect. So instead of what the technical documentation had, which was use of computer, I'm going to put something more in like how can I use my computer, or rules around my computer use, something like that. And then underneath that, we're going to break up that content that we have in each one of those lessons into micro content. So we want to bring those into micro learnings, micro pieces that are very targeted pieces of content. Typically one concept in each piece of micro content. So underneath the lesson, email and the internet, we have 4 different areas that I can see us breaking it up into. So we have access, privacy, security, and messaging. And then with our second lesson, software code of ethics, I saw 2 different places. We had copywriting and antivirus. And then I will be adding in the pieces that are missing. So in this course, we're going to do a knowledge check and an activity, some type of activity to reinforce the learning. And for this, we're going to do knowledge checks. And with knowledge checks, I typically mean that these are not going to be graded. They're going to be checkpoints for the learner to just make sure that they're grasping the concepts that they have. A lot of times we'll put these in right after one of those pieces, and you'll see as I build out this program that we'll have a lesson with some content like access, privacy, security, and messaging, and then a knowledge check immediately following, asking some type of a question or having some type of a reflection or something that they're doing to kind of cement that. So once I have this action plan and the architecture down, again, I want to put this through evaluation with the SME and the stakeholders. So if there's only one evaluation that you can do during the process, this is the most important one. It will allow you to make sure that you have successfully identified all parts before building. This is important because building out these pieces in a piece of software and then adding those into the LMS is extremely time consuming. And if you get to the end and you've missed the mark, then you want to make sure that you don't have to go back and redo it, because that can really hit your ROI and be extremely costly in the end. So now we're going to be talking about developing. We will be developing the content itself and taking it from the technical documentation world and build it into a more engaging and hopefully interactive experience. So note when developing content for learning, the more senses you are able to incorporate into learning, the higher the retention rate of the learning. So if you can provide an experience where they are reading, using visuals, clicking on the content or interacting with it, tactical or visual, as well as listening to a voiceover of the content, which is audio, then you've just hit 3 different senses in the online course. This is much better experience than having someone just read content or just hearing the content. So hitting those different senses is going to make sure that they are retaining that information. So let's take a look at how we can break up this piece of content and where that micro content is going to be broken out. So this is what it looked like before in technical documentation. So I've broken it out into the access information, privacy, security, and messaging. And now let's see different ways that we can translate this into learning. So I used PowerPoint to create a clickable experience. There's a lot of different things obviously you can use that you can use to create content, but I'm just showing an easy way to do it in PowerPoint. So when I click on access, I have something pop up. So depending on your learning platform, there may be different ways of being able to develop content that you have the ability to expand sections that have been closed before, turning tiles to reveal the information, have a drag line that reveals the definition or content as you drag it. Really, the sky is the limit, depending obviously on your ability to create within that platform. But there's a lot of different options that you can have to do this. You could also add in audio to this piece that can be triggered when you click the button. And then that also will hit on that third sense. So here is one for privacy. I've changed the color a little bit. I've added an icon on top of it for more visual. I have the information on the right-hand side, but then I also did a summary at the bottom, a TLDR, added in a little bit of humor. TLDR is too long, didn't read. So, if you want them to get just one piece of information out of this, what would that be? You also could put an example of the type of email that would, maybe be a personal email, but hey, it's on a company computer, so that still means that it is under our rights, and you don't have any privacy rights with this email because you did get it through our company computer per our policy. So looking at copyright, so this is part of our second lesson under the Code of Ethics. I'm adding in more information here. So as I click on copyright, I have information popping in. This was all stuff from the technical document. I also can add in an image to the left. This is a clickable link that takes them to more information if they want to dig deeper. So again, in PowerPoint, there are some things you can do to kind of make it interactive and still be able to, get your point across and have the information there. So in this slide, I wanted to show you some options outside of PowerPoint. For the sake of the webinar, I've just taken screenshots from what I created, and I'll just kind of explain the experience as I click through. But I created this with a really simple, cheap, interactive tool that you can use. And when you click on each one of these icons, you get information that pops up about each one of them. So I was able to click on access. I can put my access information in here. You can put images in here, but again, a little bit more engaging than the previous stuff. So if I were to go in and click on privacy, messaging, security, those all will have their own content. You can also add audio into this. So upon clicking on access, it also would be able to then read off that information. So this, again, is a really easy way to take that content and make it into something engaging, something nice to look at, and something that has several different senses that are being touched on as you go. This was actually a template that already existed. This particular software has a bunch of templates that they put out and use. And so this took me about 10 minutes to set up. So super easy, something that was really easy to go through and get done. And I think provides a lot of good value for a learner and would look great in a learning management system and would work awesome on a phone or a tablet, being able to just click on those different pieces. So lastly, we need to add in that last piece, which is the check on learnings. So as I said, the check on learnings are going to be not graded. So they're really just going to be there to give our learners information and make sure that they're able to do checkpoints. So this check on learning is, I know that what I'm going to be clicking on is false. So when I click on true, I have the ability to then bring up feedback. This is a check on learning that I built into one of the learning platforms that I use. It's hard to build in true learning check on learnings and quizzing into PowerPoint itself. So you're really dependent upon the platform you have or what you have access to as far as being able to build in check on learnings. If you don't have access to something where you can have true false questions or multiple choice questions, then you can always build out reflections, or you can kind of build something into PowerPoint to mimic that. They wouldn't be something that you would be able to grade, like I said, or track in an LMS, but at least it's something that you could have. So like I said, there's this ability to have feedback based on what you choose. A multiple choice will allow you to have feedback on the right answers as well as the wrong answers. So it's kind of nice place for them to be able to come in and say, am I learning? Am I ingesting this content the way that I need to? And if not, then that way they can always go back and redo the training and the learning, and it's all digestible. So it's in small areas and small chunks of content. So it won't take them long to be able to go back and just do that quickly. So then I also wanted to put in some type of an activity and something for them to do to kind of reinforce that learning. So I added in a piece around making sure that they're going out and that IT has their password on file, and make sure you reach out to IT. Now, again, this is not something that you would necessarily be able to tell if they did or not, but it is something that you always want to put in some type of an activity that they can go off and do and have the opportunity to go off and do. So now all that's left really is being able to have implementation. So that implementation piece is really then taking it and putting it into the learning management platform. And this, you can see how I have broken up this content. So we have that top lesson, the email and the internet. Right below it, you have that check on learning. So it's going to be automatically following that piece of content. That micro content is going to be a check on learning that speaks directly to that reinforces the learning. You have the activity below that further reinforces that learning. And then you go into that next lesson. So this is how I like to break up my micro content and my micro learning, is to break it up by check on learnings. At the end, you can always have an overarching assessment if that's something that HR wants, or if that's something that your stakeholder wants. But this is really, the best way to kind of put together these check on learnings. It allows them to go in and see, oh, I have 5 minutes. I can go in and do that real quick email and the internet lesson, and then I can come back to the rest of it later. And this is all really nice on a mobile device or on a tablet and can be accessed online. So the last piece really left in all of this, as far as the ADDIE model goes, is evaluation. And this may or may not fall on your plate. So once you kind of have developed the program and you've put it into the LMS, this may or may not be something that you are doing. But hopefully your company is getting feedback from the learners, and they are looking at the feedback and making updates to the content based on that feedback. So one of the biggest things that I always say when I'm developing content, when I'm talking to clients and building content for them, is we are not building content for ourselves. We are building content for our audience. So we want to make sure that we are meeting them where they need, that we are meeting their needs, and that we understand what they want and what they need. And the only way that we can do that with a program is to go back and ask them, how did it go? What worked well? What was missing? How was the learner experience? What content would have been nice to have that you didn't? What do we need to add? So you can ask all sorts of follow-up questions in a survey, or if it's a pilot, you can do it live. But getting that feedback and making sure that you then go and implement any changes you want to make sure that you're constantly bringing value and making that program successful, and not letting your content get stagnant. And I think that's one of the biggest things is when learning programs are developed, is that companies will just leave them. They'll put them like, okay, we did that, check mark, and they leave them, and they never go back and kind of look at them, and they end up getting stagnant, and nobody wants to interact with a learning program that has become stagnant, old, outdated, and isn't currently, following some of the newer trends that are happening in the learning and development world. So that is really it for this presentation. I know that I touched on a couple different instructional design methodologies, and I know I just scratched the surface on ADDIE and on the tell me, show me, let me approach to building out content. But I think that you can see that it was very easy to take that technical document that I had and just build it into some bite-sized, interactive, engaging pieces that you can easily implement and have a really basic program. Now, there's a lot of other things that you can do with learning programs that we didn't touch on, and I'll actually probably be touching on some of those pieces when I speak at Mad World. So I will be doing a couple sessions where I'm going to be diving deeper into instructional design methodologies, kind of picking them apart. But yeah, this hopefully you were able to get a few things that are going to help you take that back to your company and, you know, hopefully build out a learning and development program that is valuable to your clientele, and you don't have to do too much work to get it there.
Wonderful. Andrea, thank you so much. I know we have a few questions that have come in, and we're going to get to some of these next. And just encouraging everybody, if there's anything you're wondering about in terms of this presentation or you want to ask Andrea, please take a moment and use the question panel to pop in some questions there. We want to get to them in just a second. As you know, Mad World was just thrown out. I just want to remind everybody that we have 2 ways to attend Mad World this year. We're so excited to be back in person in Austin in October. We also have a virtual option if traveling is not something that's going to work or you can't do. Totally understand. We're just happy to have you in some form or fashion. So we hope one of these methodologies will work for you, and we hope to see you there. Andrew will be presenting there too. Wonderful session lineup. You know, the tech support lounge will be available in Austin if you can attend. So we hope you can join if you haven't already registered for one of these options. So pop on over to our website. You can take a look at both of those. The other thing I just want to mention too, before we get to a couple of these questions that have come in, you know, if you're new to Flare and you don't yet have it, or if you have questions about pricing or licensing, please reach out to the sales team. I think there's one other slide, Andrew, if you wouldn't mind advancing to there. Thank you so much. There is a promotion. Yeah, no, appreciate it. There is a promotion running through the end of June. I just want to remind everybody about, so if you're looking to build out your team or looking to acquire Flare, now's a great time. There is a buy 3, get 1 free promotion. So it's a great opportunity to get more for your dollar through the end of June. So please reach out to the sales team if you have any questions about that, which applies to Flare, Central, and the authoring and management system, or AMS as we like to call it. So reach out to us if you have questions about how you can take advantage of that. Okay, Andrew, we have a few questions that have come in, and some really fun ones actually that I think you'll there's a couple. I'm trying to like group some together to kill multiple with one stone here, but we threw out a couple of terms here throughout in the presentation today that might be new to some of the attendees. One is a learning management system, or LMS. Could you speak a little bit about what that is and kind of how that fits into the overarching learning and development space? Might be a new term for some folks.
Yeah, absolutely. So learning management system or learning platform, they can be called a lot of different things in the ecosystem now, is a place where you're going to be putting your learning content. So it's a platform where you can set up a university, an academy. You probably have interacted with them before if you've ever done any type of online learning through a university, if you've taken any online courses. It probably is housed on a learning management system. So this system takes a wide variety of different types of content. The thing that a learning management system does that like a Wikipedia won't do, or if you have, you know, some type of like internal intranet, what it does is it actually is able to track who has gone through what pieces of content. It can track quizzing, it can track assessments, and it then can give managers and you know, individuals kind of a dashboard that shows where their employees are doing well, who's gone through what. So it's just a way to manage, in a place that we can manage all of this really big content and these videos. And yeah, so that's kind of what a learning management system is. They oftentimes now will have, they'll have apps that you can download onto the phone as well. So you can have a desktop version, but you also, a lot of them have built out ones that work really nicely for the phone and the tablet. So the experiences are really amazing. But yeah, that's kind of a learning management system. Did I answer that question, do you think?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
And I think within that space too, there's other new terms that have come about that folks are wondering about. I know there's things called, somebody asked about the acronym alphabet soup, the LMS, the learning management system.
Mm-hmm.
What about things like, somebody asked too, what about things like what's a learning record store? It sounds like some folks are sort of exploring these different platforms, and maybe you can explain a little bit about what some of these other acronyms mean in terms of learning record store, or LRS, as I've heard it called. How does that fit into the whole ecosystem? And also maybe like a learning content management system, or LCMS. This is another one someone's asked about.
Yeah.
So many
So, no, there's so many acronyms, and I'll be honest, a lot of them are the same thing. They're just marketed a little bit differently because they know that LMS in the past has typically had kind of a, I don't want to say a negative connotation, but a lot of times you think LMS and you think really, really big and heavy and hard to navigate and bad user experience and really hard to admin. And so a lot of times I see a lot of companies that are now talking about learning experience platforms. So an LXP or a learning engagement system, an LES. They're all going to be a learning management system. It's a platform where you can manage learning. Now the LRS, a learning record store, is different. So that is going to be more on the side of that will work with an LMS or learning management system, but that talks more to like, I'm going to throw another acronym out there, XAPI. So this is where you're able to track and keep track of learning that takes place outside of a learning platform. So for instance, you might have a learning platform that has a bunch of content on it and you have people going through that content. But you also have people in your company that learn on YouTube. Maybe they go watch videos on YouTube. Maybe they have gone out to other areas to learn. And you want to make sure that you're kind of keeping track of all the learning organically that is going on with that individual. So you can, there's a lot of learning management systems that have what they call XAPI, the ability to connect to outside learning, and that learning record store is going to be one of those places that can basically keep track of all of those different learning records and then pump it back into an LMS so that all that information can be captured and followed and kept in one place, so you can get a round picture of what that learner has done outside of just the content you've created internally for that learning management system.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And in sort of the space, another question that has come up today is, you mentioned, XAPI. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, it is, it sounds like we have some folks on the call that maybe have experience with these terms, and, there's always sort of been SCORM, right? That's sort of been the term that everybody uses, and sort of a newer player on the block is this XAPI. Can you speak to a little bit about the differences there and how that fits in?
Yeah, so SCORM is actually going to be a type of output from like the document itself. So a learning management system will take in content that is SCORM compliant. And what that SCORM is doing is it's able to then, that SCORM is it's a wrapper essentially that goes around the document or the piece of content itself and allows you to track anything that's happening with it. So if you are in something like Captivate, so Captivate is a rapid authoring tool, and you've probably taken these courses before where you're click through and you're interacting with different characters, and you can kind of has like a decision tree, and it's what typical e-learning content looks like. Those are typically created by something like a Captivate or a Storyline, which are rapid authoring tools, and those are wrapped in a SCORM wrapper. And what you can do with those is you can actually build into those courses checkpoints, checks on learnings, assessments, this decision tree. You can see kind of how people went through the piece of content, and you can keep those, basically you can take that and you can keep that in, sorry, I'm having a hard time getting the word what I need to for this. You can track that information, and then that way, if I were to take like a Camtasia video, for instance, and I tried to build stuff into it and it's not wrapped in SCORM, I wouldn't be able to track any of the stuff that was in the video itself. I can track that it was watched and that was it. So SCORM allows you basically to track anything that's happening within that piece of content if it is wrapped within that SCORM wrapper. So what XAPI does, and it's basically, XAPI stands for Experience API. And what that does, it's a piece of software that is allowing you to track any learning experiences that are happening outside of your LMS. So if you have individuals that are, and that's by using a learning record store, but if you have any individuals that are going out and like I said, kind of, you know, you have YouTube or you have an external, maybe you have Udemy or some type of other learning platform that you have some types of learning on. So say you have people that take certifications or need to take content for certain certifications, and they're not inside of your LMS, you can actually kind of track all of that learning and then put it back in through that experience API. And it's a connection with APIs from this piece of software to your LMS. And the LMS has to be able to have that ability to connect and pull in the information. Most do. You'll also see XAPI called tin can. That's like the old term, but sometimes they'll say we're XAPI or tin can compliant. But that's kind of what that does, is it allows you to track all of those external experiences that so many people have, and that they go out and do outside of just an LMS that you're using. It's all, there's a lot of moving parts when you start building out with those pieces. So I know it's a little bit confusing with what goes where.
Yeah. And do you find when you're working with companies that oftentimes you need to adjust? I'm thinking of writing the the initial sort of source content, you know, and using your example as the manual. I mean, do you find too that you have to work with companies to adjust content for different audience needs or points of needs? Again, I'm combining a few questions that have come into one, and for the out of essence of time. So
Yeah.
how do you adjust content for different audiences that might all stem from the same source?
Yeah, absolutely.
We lost audio there. Did we lose you, Andrea? Oops. Well, I think we might have lost Andrea on the audio. Hold on, folks. Let's just do a quick, we might have a technology snafu here. Okay, so I think maybe some of you are on can give me a little high sign in the question. I'm hoping you can hear me. I'm wondering if we have a little audio issue with Andrea's mic. So it looks like everybody can hear me okay. So I hope I'm not talking over you, Andrea. So it looks like folks, can you just give me a high sign? Can you? Okay, so it looks like everybody can hear me, but not Andrea. All right. Shoot. Boy, technology is great, except when it doesn't work, right, everybody? Okay, so we'll just give it a quick minute here. If we have completely lost Andrea's audio, then I'm going to just apologize to everybody. I know we have some more questions that have come in. If we don't get her back, what I'm going to do is we'll go ahead and wrap the session, and we'll keep this open for a little bit if you want to keep your questions coming in. But as I mentioned, we're going to be following up with that question and answer document after the fact, and we'll be following up with everybody that we didn't get to, and so you'll have that information. So I think we might have lost Andrea on the audio. Shoot. So I think we're just going to keep this open for a moment. And so just again, I want to thank everybody for coming. Drop in a few last minute questions if you have them. We're going to follow up with everybody with this recording, as I said, and get back to all of the questions that we didn't get to live. So I do apologize for this technology snafu. Never fun, but we're trying to handle this as elegantly as possible here. But just thanks everybody for coming. Thanks for being engaged and for your great session questions. Thanks, Andrea, so much. Hopefully you can hear this. We'll go ahead and wrap it here, and we hope to see you on another session. Please reach out to us if you have any questions at all. We're very happy to address them. So thanks everybody, and hope to connect with you again soon. Take care.